Emergency room 214. The intercom shattered the morning silence of Boston's cancer hospital. I jolted upright, my bloodshot eyes snapping open from exhaustion. I hadn't even managed to take off my coat after the night shift before my body moved on its own. My pen clattered to the floor, papers scattering in all directions, but I had no time to pick them up. My heart pounded as I sprinted down the corridor, shoes slipping on the cold, damp tiles, each breath mingling with the winter air that escaped in white bursts. Families pressed themselves against the walls, worried whispers trailing in my wake. In a hospital, an alarm is never a good sign. It always means a life is hanging by a thread. I shoved open the door to room 214. The scene before me was a storm. A young girl writhed on the hospital bed, clutching her stomach, vomiting over and over. The harsh sound of her retching blended with the frantic beeping of the monitor. On the pillow, clumps of hair had fallen away, as if pieces of her youth were slipping beyond her grasp. Her face was pale, lips cracked, sweat soaking through the collar of her hospital gown. "SPO2 down to 88%, the nurse shouted, fumbling with the tubing. I rushed forward, adjusted the oxygen mask, and lifted the girl's head to keep her from choking. I could feel every burning, frantic breath against my wrist. To me, she wasn't just a name on a chart. She was a soul fighting not to be carried away. In the corner of the room, a middle-aged woman in a worn housekeeper's uniform suddenly stood up. She clutched an old laptop tightly to her chest, her eyes swollen from crying but still shining with determination. I knew her, Fatima, the mother of Aisha, the young girl struggling on the hospital bed, the woman who worked tirelessly, carrying her entire world on her shoulders for her only daughter. "Doctor, please, save her. She just finished her exam." Fatima's voice trembled, her hands gripping the laptop so tightly her knuckles turned white. A young nurse leaned close to me and whispered over the noise. She had a fever of about 102 degrees Fahrenheit, and still this morning she logged in to take her online exam. Only after finishing did she collapse like this. I froze for a moment. I looked at Aisha, an 18-year-old girl who should have been sitting in a classroom right now, or strolling the streets with her friends. Instead, she lay here, battling acute leukemia, her body frail and exhausted, yet still clinging to the hope of finishing her exam as if it were her last lifeline. The retching eased for a moment, and Aisha cracked her eyes open. They glistened with tears, weak yet stubbornly defiant. Her voice was hoarse, trembling as she whispered, I submitted it, doctor." The whole room seemed to freeze. A simple sentence, yet to me it cut straight through my chest like a blade. I thought of my younger sister, 17 too, once holding the same dream of going to college. But a car accident ended it all. Back then, I was only a third-year medical student, standing powerless as I saw her lying lifeless in the morgue. That pain never faded. It only hid beneath the endless nights of hospital shifts. And now, in Aisha's eyes, I saw the reflection of my lost sister, the hunger for knowledge, fragile hope, and a youth cruelly cut short. I drew in a deep breath, forced my emotions down, and quickly ordered, "Prepare anti-nausea meds, start IV fluids, draw another blood sample and run a full count, and bring a warm towel." The nurses moved into action immediately. Fatima stepped closer, her hollow eyes fixed on her daughter's labored breathing. I caught the trembling of her hand as she placed it gently on Aisha's shoulder. Those hands, thin and calloused from years of scrubbing floors, carried a strength beyond compare, the strength of a mother. "My daughter, all she wants is to study, doctor. She says a scholarship is the only way out of that neighborhood," Fatima whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of grief. I clenched my jaw, a lump rising in my throat. I knew exactly what that neighborhood meant, the poor southern edge of Boston, where immigrants and people of color lived, where children grew up surrounded by suspicion, hardship, and prejudice. For many, a full scholarship was the only ticket out. I looked back at Aisha, her thin hair matted with sweat, her skin pale, yet her gaze unwavering. For a moment I felt myself suspended between two worlds, one ruled by sterile protocols, numbers, and lab results, and the other by the beating heart of humanity, desperate to be seen, to live a life with dignity. Aisha lay still, her eyes half closed, her breathing still ragged after the violent bout of vomiting. In the hospital room, the only sounds were the steady drip of the IV and the wind whistling against the window. The sharp sting of antiseptic mingled with the faint warmth of ginger tea Fatima had just brewed, creating a strange scent, at once comforting and suffocating. During the break between medications, I decided to stay. I pulled a plastic chair close to the bed, setting the patient file gently on the table. Outside in the corridor, the shuffle of doctors' shoes and the rattle of gurney wheels continued at their frantic pace, but here time seemed to slow, shrinking down to just 3 people: an 18-year-old girl fighting leukemia, a worn-out single mother who loved her with everything she had, and a young doctor trying to learn how to listen with his whole heart. Aisha opened her eyes, glancing at me with a trace of shyness. They were tired, ringed red from fever, but within them burned the resilience of someone who had been fighting too long to allow herself the luxury of weakness. "Doctor," her voice was hoarse, strained. "I'm sorry if I worried everyone this morning. I couldn't miss the exam. The full scholarship is the only way out of my neighborhood." I nodded lightly, saying nothing. I knew that sometimes patients didn't need solutions. They just needed someone willing to sit still and hear the fears and dreams they'd been forced to bury. Aisha drew in a deep breath and went on. "Where I live, people call it the forgotten side of Boston. The buses are always late, the ambulances never make it in time. The apartments are cracked, leaking. In winter, the wind slices through like knives on your skin. The police only come when there are gunshots, and then they leave, leaving fear hanging in the air. Most of my friends dropped out to work. Some joined gangs. I don't want my future to end in a dark alley just because I was born there. I want my mother to see me in a graduation gown. Just once, to sit in the audience, her head held high, watching her daughter walk across the stage. Then I'll find a good job so she won't have to struggle anymore, so she can have one real day of rest." The girl's voice trembled, sounding at once like a confession and a vow. Fatima, still sitting beside her, had eyes that shone with the kind of fierce love only mothers who have sacrificed everything can understand. Love without conditions, without limits. Fatima whispered, "You will do it, Aisha. You are stronger than anyone I've ever known." My nose stung, emotion rising in me. I realized that this girl's strength did not appear out of nowhere. It had been built day after day by the quiet sacrifices of her mother, a woman who had sold everything precious just to keep her daughter's dream alive. My gaze drifted to the old laptop Fatima had placed carefully on the table. Its casing was scratched, the keyboard polished smooth from use. Curious, I asked softly, "This laptop, you use it for online classes?" Fatima nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yes, I sold my wedding ring to buy it. People said I was crazy, to sell the only keepsake of my husband for a piece of old electronics. But to me, it isn't just a laptop. It's the bridge for my daughter to step beyond that neighborhood. It's the key to a future I never even dared to dream of." I looked at this woman, and inside me rose a mix of sorrow and admiration. I thought of the countless families I had met, parents who gave up halfway, children who resigned themselves to fate. But here, in room 214, was a mother willing to give up everything so her child could hold on to hope. Aisha gave a faint smile, her cracked lips trembling. "Mom always says this laptop is a treasure. I think so too. I want it with me until the day I graduate, so she'll know her sacrifices weren't in vain." I didn't know what to say. All I felt was a tightness in my chest, as if everything medical school had ever taught me, protocols, medications, prognoses, suddenly seemed so small compared to the fierce determination shining in this girl's eyes. I looked at Aisha, then at Fatima, and said slowly, "Aisha, do you know, there are some patients who make us doctors not only want to treat them, but to fight alongside them. You are one of those." The room fell silent. Aisha looked at me, her lips curving into a fragile yet radiant smile. Fatima's eyes welled with tears. I turned away, trying to hide the surge of emotion, but I knew in my heart that this moment had etched itself into my memory. A strong gust of wind rattled the hospital window, sweeping the curtains aside. Outside, Boston was still gripped by bitter cold, its streets blanketed in snow, yet inside that small room, a quiet flame burned, the flame of a mother's love, of a young girl's hunger for education, of the strength found when one dares to defy fate. I told myself, I cannot let this flame be extinguished. No matter what it takes, I must protect it. That afternoon, pale winter sunlight broke through the frosted window. In room 214, Aisha sat propped against her pillow, the familiar laptop resting on her lap. Her face was gaunt, her skin ashen, her lips cracked, her hair almost completely gone save for a few damp strands clinging to her head. And yet, in that moment her eyes blazed with life because on the screen the words appeared, "Congratulations, you have been awarded a full scholarship." Aisha's heart felt as though it might burst from her chest. She let out a trembling laugh, her thin hands clutching the laptop tightly. In that moment, the hospital, the chemotherapy, the pain, all of it seemed to vanish. What remained was the pure joy of a dream finally opening its doors. "Mom," she whispered. Fatima rushed over, quickly wiping her hands on her apron before taking the laptop. She read the words line by line, her lips trembling, her eyes brimming with tears. A single tear fell onto the worn keyboard. "Aisha, you did it. You really did it." Her voice broke as her hand shook, brushing her daughter's hair. In Fatima's eyes, for the first time in years, there was not only worry, but a radiant pride. I happened to walk in at that exact moment, holding test results in my hand. I froze in the doorway, watching the two of them embrace, the battered laptop clutched between their shaking hands like a priceless trophy. My chest tightened. Moments like this, rare and fragile, were the reason I had chosen medicine. But then, the dream so freshly opened was cut with salt. A sharp ping sounded, the inbox lit up with a new message. Aisha opened it and the light in her eyes died instantly. Cold words glared back at her. "We don't want to live with a bald cancer patient in our dorm. Sorry, not sorry." Along with it came a stream of anonymous messages, dripping with mockery and cruelty. "You think college is for patients like you? Will a wig really be enough to hide the truth? Don't bring the stench of sickness into our dorm." Aisha froze, the hand holding the mouse trembling uncontrollably. Her eyes widened, brimming with tears, her lips moving but no sound coming out. Fatima bent down, glanced at the screen, and her expression changed instantly. She gripped her daughter's shoulders tightly, her own eyes red, her mouth quivering. She wanted to say something comforting, but the words caught in her throat. "No, no, it can't be," Aisha whispered. And then, as if torn open, a cry burst out of her, violent, choking sobs. Her whole body curled in on itself as if she wanted to disappear from the light, from the world. "I did everything, everything," she screamed through her tears. "I endured the pain, the vomiting, the hair falling out, the stares of contempt, just for one chance. And still they don't want me, just because I'm sick, just because I don't look like other normal girls." I was stunned. I had never seen eyes so full of despair. Eyes that only moments before had been blazing with joy were now nothing but a pile of wet ashes. My chest tightened, as though a hand was squeezing the breath out of me. I had read in medical textbooks about the psychological trauma of cancer patients, but witnessing it with my own eyes was fiercer than any words could capture. Fatima pulled her daughter into her arms, tears falling heavily onto the hospital gown. She whispered, "Aisha, don't listen to them. You are my light, my pride. No one has the right to take that away from you." But Aisha gently pushed her away, her tear-filled eyes locking onto her mother's. "But Mom, I'm so tired. Every morning when I look in the mirror, I only see a bald girl. Her face covered in breakouts from the medicine, her body so fragile it feels like the wind could snap it. My friends avoid me. The school treats me like a burden. And now, even when I fight with everything I have and defeat the illness, society will still only see me with pity or disgust. How am I supposed to live like this?" Every word she spoke cut into Fatima's heart and mine like a blade. Fatima broke down sobbing as she clutched her daughter tightly. "My child, I wish I could carry it all for you. If only this illness had fallen on me. All I want is for you to live your 18 years as you should, to laugh like other kids." Aisha buried her face into her mother's shoulder, her cries coming in waves. They were not just the cries of a girl, but the howl of a youth stolen, of dreams crushed under prejudice. I stepped back, leaning against the wall. My mind spun with questions. I'm a doctor, but is prescribing medicine and fluids enough? Is there any way to shield her from the cruelty of the world outside? I thought of my sister, the young face frozen in her last photo, eyes full of dreams that never had the chance to bloom. The pain of the past and the pain before me overlapped, leaving me breathless. In the hospital room, Aisha's sobs echoed, broken by harsh coughs that shook her frail frame. Fatima staggered under the weight of holding her, trembling as if letting go would cause the entire world to collapse. I moved closer, placing my hand on Aisha's shoulder. My voice came out rough and low. "Aisha, you've come this far. Don't let their cruelty break your dream. Illness may take your hair, your smile, But no one has the right to take away your mind or your pride. If they close one door, we will find another. If they turn their backs, we will make them turn around. Aisha lifted her tear-filled eyes, a flicker of doubt mingling with a fragile spark of hope. "Is there really another way, doctor?" she whispered. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat unyielding. I didn't have a certain answer, but in that moment I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't turn away. I had to do something, not just as a doctor, but as a human being. 1 week later, the snow on Boston's streets had begun to melt, leaving behind murky gray puddles. The cancer hospital still glowed like a lighthouse against the harsh winter. In my small office, I sat before the computer, my eyes shadowed with exhaustion yet burning bright. On the desk lay a stack of documents, Aisha's medical records, her stellar grades, her essays filled with effort and grit. I had just finished writing a long letter to the university's admissions committee, not only as her doctor, but as a witness. I wrote about Aisha, the 18-year-old girl who had battled leukemia with extraordinary courage. I told of mornings when she sat exams online despite high fevers, of hair falling in clumps while she still held her head high, of the boundless love and sacrifice of her widowed mother. I didn't hide the brutal truth of her illness, but I pressed one point. If a student like Aisha is denied simply because of her bald head, then education itself will have lost its soul. I hit send, and for the first time in months, I felt a quiet relief. The week that followed stretched like a century. Aisha endured another round of chemotherapy, her body so frail that even walking a few steps into the corridor left her dizzy. Yet in her eyes there was no despair, only a quiet flame, kept alive because her mother and I refused to let her face it all alone. That day, I walked into room 214 with an envelope in my hand. I paused at the door, trying to stay composed, but the smile tugging at my lips betrayed me. "Aisha, there's a letter from your school." The room went silent. With trembling hands, Aisha took the envelope, her thin fingers struggling to tear open the seal. Fatima held her breath, her hands clenched tightly together. The first line appeared, and then Aisha's face lit up, tears streaming down in torrents. She burst into sobs, but they were tears of joy. "We are proud to welcome you. The university will provide you with a private dorm room, fully accommodated." Fatima broke down, clutching her daughter tightly, her sobs mingling with Aisha's laughter and tears. I stood still, overwhelmed, my chest swelling with emotions I could hardly name. "Aisha," I said, my voice hoarse, "you did it. You don't just have a scholarship, you have recognition. They opened the door because you deserve it." Aisha lifted her gaze, her eyes still wet with tears but shining brightly. "No, doctor, I didn't do it alone. If it weren't for you, I would have given up." Fatima gripped my hand, her voice trembling. "Doctor, you didn't just save her from illness, you saved her dream too." I smiled, my eyes burning red. I realized that in this journey of being a doctor, few moments are as precious as this one. The moment I understood that medicine is not only about drugs, protocols, or successful surgeries. Medicine, above all, is about touching the human spirit, helping people hold their heads high in the storm. On the day Aisha was discharged, rare sunlight spilled over Boston's winter sky. She was still frail, her hair only beginning to grow back in sparse strands, but her steps were steadier. In her hands she clutched the admission letter, pressed tightly to her chest as if it were a treasure. Fatima guided her, her face lined with years of hardship, but her eyes glowing with a brilliance they had never known. I walked behind them, watching mother and daughter. On those small shoulders, I no longer saw the weight of despair, but the strength of faith and love. At the hospital's front doors, Aisha paused, drawing in a deep breath. The cold wind brushed her face, but she didn't flinch. She turned to her mother and me, smiling. "I will wear that graduation gown, doctor, I promise." I smiled back at her, then lifted my eyes to Boston's sky, the rare blue after so many gray days. And I knew this journey would be long, full of trials. But at least today, a young girl had reclaimed her dignity, a mother had found hope, and a doctor had come to understand more deeply the true meaning of medicine.